Never confront a serpent in the open. Watch it, study its movements, then disappear, so that when it strikes, it finds nothing but silence. They say you should be kind to everyone, that you should rise above the toxicity, that if someone is cruel, manipulative, or downright hostile, you should be the bigger person. Turn the other cheek. Smile through the insult. Pray for your enemies. But Machiavelli, had he heard that, would have smirked in disgust. Because the truth, smart people, those who actually rise to the top, don't coddle toxic people. They don't try to change them. They don't waste time appealing to the better angels of their nature. They treat toxicity like poison. Not something to debate with, something to remove, outmaneuver, or in some cases, infect back. This isn't about being evil. It's about being effective. Let's start with a scene. You're Julius Caesar. It's 44 BC. You've conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, brought Rome under your heel. But behind the smiles of the Senate, something festers: envy. Old power structures crumbling under your rise. Whispers of dictatorship. Warnings that you've become too powerful. Now, imagine if Caesar had followed the modern advice. Talk it out with Brutus. Have a heart-to-heart with Cassius. Maybe they're just misunderstood. We all know what happened. Even with all his brilliance, Caesar let the snakes too close. He was stabbed 23 times by men he called friends. That's what happens when power is naive. That's what happens when toxic people are handled with morality instead of strategy. The first law of survival in a world full of hidden daggers. Know who you're dealing with. Not everyone wants peace. Some people feed off conflict. Some people thrive in manipulation. And the smarter you become, the more threatening you are to people who live in the shadows. Smart people don't confront toxicity head-on unless they're cornered. They calculate. They profile. They understand that toxic people aren't just annoying. They're corrosive. And if left unchecked, they'll eat through everything you've built. Look at modern politics. Watch how powerful players treat each other behind closed doors. They may smile in public, but every move is a calculation. Every handshake has a backstory. Because in power games, the people smiling the hardest are often the most dangerous. You've met people like this. The colleague who acts like your friend, but subtly undermines you in meetings. The family member who plays victim while constantly stirring drama. The partner who chips away at your self-worth, all while pretending to care. These aren't just difficult people. They're toxic, because they leave you worse than they found you. And if you're not careful, you'll start playing by their rules, defending yourself, explaining yourself, giving them more power by reacting to their madness. That's how smart people lose. Not because they're not intelligent, but because they think intelligence means being rational with the irrational. Machiavelli never said to be cruel. He said to be strategic. He warned that men are ungrateful, fickle liars and deceivers. That if you expect loyalty without leverage, you're begging to be betrayed. So how do smart people treat toxic people? They become invisible. Not physically, but emotionally. They detach. They stop feeding the narcissist with reactions. They stop bleeding for the victim who never heals. They stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding them. They don't expose the toxic person. They outlast them. And when confrontation is necessary, they don't go in blind. They use what I call the Kissinger doctrine. Henry Kissinger, the master manipulator of 20th century geopolitics, understood that power is not about brute force. It's about leverage, options, influence. When dealing with hostile nations, Kissinger didn't try to convert them. He triangulated them. He played China against Russia. He isolated threats through alliances, not arguments. Smart people treat toxic individuals the same way. If someone at work is undermining you, don't confront them with emotion. Understand their weakness. Are they insecure about relevance? Then outshine them where it matters, but never directly. Make yourself too competent to challenge. but too humble to target. If a friend or partner turns toxic, don't try to fix them. People don't change from your love. They change from consequences. Create distance. Withdraw access. Watch how they unravel when their control slips. And above all, never tell a toxic person that you're onto them. That's the mistake Caesar made. That's the mistake millions make every day. You think exposing the truth will free you. It won't. It will only escalate the game. And in a battle of chaos, toxic people always have home advantage. Instead, let them underestimate you. Let them think they've won. Then quietly, slowly, deliberately, build your exit, build your power, build your silence. Because silence is terrifying to those who feed off your energy. You see, toxic people need something. Attention, emotional chaos. If you stop giving it to them, they'll flail. They'll smear you. They'll bait you. But that's their desperation, not your responsibility. You don't owe closure to someone who only came to watch you bleed. And if you're in a position of power, like a CEO, a leader, or even a parent, understand this: your tolerance for toxicity becomes the culture. What you allow becomes the norm. And once that poison spreads, it doesn't stop with you. It infects the system. Napoleon understood this. He knew that loyalty wasn't guaranteed. It had to be managed, watched, enforced. He surrounded himself with ambitious, competent people, but he also kept them in check. He rotated generals. He rewarded, yes, but punished disloyalty swiftly. Not out of malice, out of necessity. Because he understood one toxic traitor can do more damage than 100 enemies outside the gate. And what about you? In your own life? What happens when you keep giving chances to someone who has shown you their pattern? You don't just lose peace. You lose time, confidence, energy, focus. The price of tolerating a toxic person isn't just stress. It's stagnation. It's potential burned in silent wars. So the smartest people, those who rise without burning out, they do one thing better than the resting. They subtract early. They don't wait for the final betrayal. They don't beg for change. They observe, verify, and when the pattern repeats, they exit, quietly, coldly, cleanly. Because not every enemy announces themselves with a sword. Some come bearing flowers, sweet words, and open arms. But Machiavelli knew, the knife always comes after the hug. Now ask yourself, who have you allowed too close? Who drains you under the disguise of love, friendship, or family? What have you tolerated in the name of morality when strategy demanded distance? This isn't about becoming ruthless. It's about choosing peace over performance, power over victimhood, strategy over sentiment, because the world doesn't reward good hearts, it rewards clear minds. And the smartest among us don't fight toxic people, they outgrow them. And that is always more powerful than revenge. Toxic people don't just hurt you. They infect the way you think. They make you question your instincts, doubt your memory, sabotage your own power. That's their genius and their weapon. They don't need to defeat you in public. They just need to plant enough confusion that you begin to destroy yourself in private. But here's the Machiavellian truth. Smart people, truly strategic people, never let someone else rewrite their reality. Because once someone controls your perception, they own your mind. And once they own your mind, they don't need chains. You'll stay right where they want you. Doubting, apologizing, explaining, shrinking. Machiavelli warned that men are driven not by truth, but by perception, by fear, by appearances, that people believe what seems to be true more than what is true. And toxic people, they know that too. They manipulate perception like artists. They turn facts into fog. They twist your words until you're apologizing for things you never did. They gaslight, triangulate, deflect, and dramatize. Because every time you chase their chaos, they gain control. This is why the first step a smart person takes when dealing with toxicity is to reclaim clarity, not emotional peace, not justice, clarity. Because clarity is the sword that cuts through manipulation. Think of someone like Otto von Bismarck. one of the most cunning statesmen in European history. Bismarck didn't waste time moralizing over his enemies. He studied them. He understood that if you want to defeat someone who thrives in chaos, you don't jump into the fire with them. You build your strategy in the calm. So when faced with a toxic person, a Machiavellian doesn't ask, why are they doing this to me? They ask, what do they gain from this behavior? What do I lose by playing into it? And what is the cost of silence? Because silence isn't always noble. Sometimes silence is submission. And Machiavelli had no patience for submissive men. He believed that fortune favors the bold, but that boldness must be calculated. So how do smart people become immune? First, they detach from the performance. They stop needing the toxic person to understand them. They stop craving fairness from someone who thrives in distortion. They accept that some people will twist the truth, and that proving them wrong is not the victory. The real victory is living in a way that renders their version irrelevant. Let me tell you a modern story. A corporate executive, rising quickly, outperforming everyone around her, starts noticing strange resistance, subtle sabotage, colleagues whispering things she never said, projects mysteriously rerouted. At first, she tries to fix it. She over-communicates. She bends over backward to appear cooperative, and it backfires. The more she explains, the more they spin. The more she apologizes, the more they attack. Until one day, she stops reacting. She builds direct relationships with decision makers, keeps records, communicates only in ways that can't be twisted. And above all, she never loses her temper. She lets the toxic people tire themselves out in games she refuses to play. Months later, those same players are exposed. Not by confrontation, but by their own obsession. Their gossip becomes obvious. Their manipulation collapses under its own weight. Why? Because they had no more fuel, no more emotional chaos to feed off of. That is how a smart person wins, not by revenge, but by erosion. Toxic people want attention. Smart people starve them of it. Toxic people want confusion. Smart people create structure. Toxic people want to pull you into the mud. Smart people build empires above it. But let's be clear. Being Machiavellian doesn't mean being cold for no reason. It means protecting what matters in your focus, your power, your inner court. Because once you let a toxic person into your inner court, your emotional world, they don't just influence you. They start to dictate you. And that's when you become their puppet, not their opponent. Caesar fell because he let Brutus into his circle. Caesar won countless battles, but he lost the one that mattered most, because it wasn't fought with swords. It was fought with misplaced trust, and this is the greatest danger of all. Toxic people often wear the mask of closeness. They'll pretend to love you, to support you, to be loyal to you. But if your success ever threatens their insecurity, that mask will drop. This is why Machiavelli advised rulers to never fully trust the loyalty of men whose interests are not tied to their own. Loyalty is not a virtue. It's a transaction. And if someone doesn't benefit from your rise, they'll eventually resent it. So ask yourself who claps when you win, who stays quiet when you succeed, who disappears when you shine. That silence is louder than any insult. And smart people listen to silence. They observe the patterns, not the excuses, not the apologies, the patterns. If someone always creates drama, always plays victim, always shifts blame, they're not having a hard time. That's their operating system. And smart people don't try to rewrite someone's code. They block it. Some may say that's harsh, that we should be patient, forgiving, that people can change. And yes, they can. But change is not your burden. Your responsibility is not to fix broken people. It's to protect your kingdom from becoming broken in the process. There's a difference between empathy and strategy. Empathy says, I understand why you're like this. Strategy says, and that's exactly why I'm limiting your access. Because if you let emotion guide all your decisions, you'll sacrifice your power on the altar of pity. And pity, Machiavelli warned, is often a luxury the powerful can't afford. This is why powerful people don't argue with toxicity. They outposition it. They don't convince the toxic person to respect them. They operate in a way that makes respect irrelevant. Because respect, when forced, is just fear in a costume. And fear, when used intelligently, can be your greatest shield.
Yes.
Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Not because fear is morally superior, but because fear creates distance. It makes people think twice before crossing you. And that hesitation, that pause before they act against you, that's the space where your power lives. Now you may be wondering, does this mean I should intimidate people? No, but you should become the kind of person people don't want to test. Someone with emotional discipline. Someone who doesn't overact. Someone who doesn't chase toxic love or drama-fueled attention. Someone who knows that real power is quiet, calm, and completely uninterested in chaos. Because the moment you react emotionally to a toxic person, they win. The moment you try to prove your innocence to someone committed to misunderstanding you, they win. The moment you break your own peace just to match their dysfunction, they win. And if you let that happen long enough, you stop recognizing yourself. You become bitter, exhausted, distrustful. And slowly, the toxic person doesn't even need to attack you anymore. Because you're already doing their job for them. That's the trap. And smart people don't fall into traps. They study them. They map them. They use them to understand the battlefield. Because life is a battlefield. Not in the childish sense of fighting everyone, but in the mature sense of choosing when to engage, when to retreat, and when to remove the enemy not with force, but with distance. If someone poisons your peace every time they walk into the room, that's not a person. That's a liability. And the longer you allow liabilities to remain, the harder it is to protect your legacy. So what do the smartest people do? They build quiet exits, emotional exits, strategic exits. They shift conversations, they reduce access. They prioritize people who pour into them, not those who drain. They treat their energy like currency. Because in a world where attention is a weapon, giving it to the wrong person is a form of self-harm. Machiavelli didn't just study rulers. He studied people. And what he understood, what most people still don't, is that the greatest threat to your power is not an outside enemy. It's the person you allow too close. The one who hides behind love. The one who wears concern like a mask. The one who cloaks envy in compliments. These are the Brutus types, the Cassius types, the smiling destroyers. And when you deal with people like that, you don't confront them. You don't expose them. You render them powerless by treating them as irrelevant. You make them smaller by making them invisible. And that is the most Machiavellian move of all. You've probably been told that you need to have hard conversations, that you owe it to others to be honest, that confronting toxic people is the immature thing to do. But Machiavelli would say, no, it's the foolish thing to do, especially when the other person doesn't want clarity, they want control. Because toxic people don't hear truth, they twist it. They don't seek resolution, they seek dominance. And when you walk into a battle expecting a conversation, they walk in ready for war. Guess who bleeds? A smart person learns this once and never forgets. You don't expose a snake by grabbing it. You step back and let it uncoil itself. You make it hiss in the light on its own. That's how you win. Not through explosive confrontations, but through the quiet revelation of time. You see, time is the greatest test of character, and toxic people fail it. Every single time. Machiavelli wasn't concerned with who was right. He was concerned with who remained, who kept power, who played the long game. And in the long game, emotional intelligence is more lethal than rage. This is why the truly smart Machiavellian mind never rushes to confront. It watches. It lets the mask slip. It allows the toxic person to dig their own grave with their own words, their own paranoia, their own obsession with being in control. It's Caesar's fatal flaw all over again. He knew the Senate was grumbling. He knew Brutus was uncomfortable. But he believed that power, once earned, was invincible. He was wrong. Power isn't what you hold. It's what you defend and what you allow. And when you allow the wrong energy to orbit your life, no matter how close, how old, how charming, you are gambling with your own future. So smart people stop gambling. They become forensic, cold when necessary, emotionally intelligent, but never emotionally reckless. Let me tell you what that looks like in real life. A man I knew, we'll call him Daniel, ran a startup. Brilliant, young, charismatic, but his second in command. A master manipulator, always subtly sowing division, pitting team members against each other, making Daniel feel dependent on him, offering solutions to problems he secretly caused. Daniel, at first, couldn't see it. He believed in loyalty. He trusted character over results. He thought if he just led by love, things would fix themselves. Until one day he realized he had built an empire on a cracked foundation. And if he didn't act soon, everything he worked for would rot from the inside. But instead of confronting the saboteur, Daniel did something smarter. He cut access. He started holding meetings without him. He rerouted decision-making to people he could verify. He didn't accuse. He didn't debate. He just became impossible to manipulate. And within months, the saboteur left on his own. Why? Because toxic people can't survive where they have no influence. Their oxygen is control. Take that away, and they suffocate in their own games. Machiavelli would have admired that move, because to him, war was not won on the battlefield, it was won in the preparation, the information, the positioning, and dealing with toxic people is exactly the same. If you think you're going to fix them with a deep talk, you've already lost. You're walking into a power game without armor, a chess match against someone who plays with knives. Smart people play a different game. They take the emotion out of it. They don't take the insults personally. They don't need to be liked, agreed with, or even understood. They know that peace is not found in harmony with everyone. Peace is found in eliminating those who profit from your chaos. Machiavelli called this virtum. Not virtue in the religious sense, but the strength of character, the will to shape reality, to take control. And part of that is understanding when to cut off a limb to save the body. Toxic people are that limb. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, it will feel cold. But nothing is colder than waking up 5 years from now, realizing you built your future around someone who was quietly destroying you the entire time. History is full of those tragedies. Just look at King Louis XV, soft, indecisive, too moral to act against those in his court who manipulated him. He trusted courtiers who whispered poison into his decisions, and it ended with a guillotine. You don't need to behead your enemies, but you do need to recognize when they've become a threat. And threats are not negotiated with. They're neutralized, quietly, permanently, surgically. This is the difference between idealists and strategists. Idealists think everyone can be reasoned with. Strategists know reason only works on the reasonable. This doesn't mean becoming cold to the world. It means becoming precise. It means learning to read intentions, not just words. It means listening not to what people say about you, but how you feel after being around them. Do you feel smaller, confused, like you owe them something even when you've done nothing wrong? That's not love. That's manipulation. And when you detect it, you don't need proof. You need distance. You don't need a confrontation. You need to become inaccessible. Machiavelli advised rulers to keep people dependent, but never to be dependent themselves. Because dependence is vulnerability. And when you depend on a toxic person for validation, support, or love, you hand them the sword that will one day cut you. Smart people create their own power. They build networks that can't be infiltrated. Fortresses made of clarity, boundaries, and discipline. Because, let's be honest, most people stay stuck with toxic individuals not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of guilt. Fear of starting over. Fear of what others will think. But Machiavelli would say, let them think. The world always judges the lion for being too aggressive. But it never questions the wolf who wears sheep's clothing, because the wolf knows to smile. The lion knows how to survive. Choose survival. If someone weaponizes your empathy against you, they are your enemy. If someone uses guilt to keep you from walking away, they don't love you. They own you. And if someone repeatedly violates your peace, drains your energy, and keeps you circling the same emotional chaos, they are not confused. They are consistent. And that consistency should be your alarm clock. Smart people don't snooze alarms. They wake up. And when they do, they don't announce it. They don't write long letters. They don't scream, cry, or beg. They just move different. And toxic people always feel that shift, because they've lost the one thing they needed most in your participation. Never forget, participation is power. When you stop reacting, explaining, defending, you take the game off the board. And in the end, that's how you destroy a toxic person's grip on you. Not by fighting back, but by making them irrelevant. The Machiavellian way isn't cruelty, it's control, not over others, over yourself. Because the person who controls their energy controls the room. And the person who walks away without dramag is always the one with real power. There's a dangerous myth that smart people are just nicer than everyone else, that they're endlessly patient, that they always rise above. But Machiavelli would laugh at that illusion. Smart people aren't saints. They're surgeons. They don't flinch at cutting what no longer serves their vision. They don't tolerate dysfunction wrapped in sentimentality. And they don't lose sleep over the disapproval of fools. Because the truth is this: the smarter you become, the quieter you get around toxic people. Not out of fear, but precision. There's nothing left to prove. Nothing to win. You've already seen through them. And once you see through someone, you can never unsee them. That fake humility, you see the ambition underneath it. The constant drama, you see the strategy behind it. The endless apologies. You see the manipulation hiding in the tone. You don't argue anymore. You don't correct their version of events. You don't chase their affection. You simply stop feeding the illusion. It's not revenge. It's revelation. The moment you see someone clearly, you realize they were never hiding. You just didn't want to believe what you saw. But once the illusion breaks, you no longer ask, why did they hurt me? You ask, why did I stay? And that question changes everything. That's the turning point, where victims become players, where morality is traded for mastery, where innocence is replaced by influence. Machiavelli didn't write for the moral majority. He wrote for those ready to rule themselves. And his message was simple: stop hoping for better people. Start building better filters. You don't need to become paranoid, but you do need to become selective, because not everyone deserves access. Not everyone deserves proximity. Not everyone is qualified to sit at your table, no matter how long you've known them. Sometimes history is the heaviest chain of all, but smart people break it. They understand that loyalty has an expiration date, that some people are chapters, not anchors, that your destiny cannot be delayed by dead weight. Toxic people always demand second chances, third chances, infinite chances, and why wouldn't they? You've taught them there are no consequences. But in the world of power, consequences are the only language that's respected. A ruler who forgives every traitor invites rebellion. A leader who excuses every lie becomes complicit. A person who tolerates every insult becomes a servant in their own story. So when you say, I've had enough, say it like a king. Not with rage, but with finality. No speeches, no justifications, just the withdrawal of access. Let them feel the silence. Let them talk to the void. Let them wonder when the door closed. Because power, real power, is not in confrontation. It's in closure. And the kind of closure that smart people master isn't emotional. It's strategic. They don't need to be understood. They need to be unavailable. They don't need to scream their boundaries. They need to enforce them quietly. And that quiet enforcement does something remarkable. It shifts the balance of power without ever raising a fist, because the toxic person expects a fight. But what they fear most is indifference. Indifference is the death of their control. And once a smart person becomes indifferent to the toxic person's cause, their narrative, their tears, their tantrums, they win not loudly, but completely. And here's the final truth Machiavelli would want you to understanding. You don't defeat a toxic person by being better than them. You defeat them by becoming untouchable, by elevating so far above their frequency that they can't even reach you. Their tricks no longer land. Their words no longer sting. Their presence no longer matters. They become a ghost in your story, a footnote, an example you'll one day use to teach others what to never tolerate again. That is what it means to rule your life. Not to dominate others, but to design a reality where only the worthy can enter. So, let me ask you, what would your life look like if you only allowed people who built you, respected you, and sharpened you? What if you measured relationships not by their length, but by their energy? What if you stopped confusing history with harmony? Because Machiavelli knew most people won't change. They'll just change tactics. They'll say what you want to hear, only to do what they've always done. And if you fall for it again, the problem isn't them. It's you. That's the final shift of the Machiavellian mind, from blame to responsibility, from victim to ruler. Because at the end of the day, your life is not shaped by who hurt you. It's shaped by who you continue to let in. And if someone poisons your peace, manipulates your emotions, and thrives in your confusion, you don't need closure. You need an exit strategy. You don't need to explain. You need to vanish. Because the smartest way to win against a toxic person is not to fight harder. It's to make sure they never get the chance to play again. So stop trying to fix them. Fix the part of you that thinks you need to. And remember what Machiavelli taught us all, that power is not taken. It is given away, bit by bit, moment by moment, in every conversation where you betrayed your own instincts to preserve someone else's comfort. Never again. Let your silence be your strategy. Let your distance be your revenge. Let your peace be your proof. Because when the toxic person finally looks around and sees nothing left to control, no reaction left to provoke, no soul left to drain, they will understand the one law they never believe: smart people don't fight toxic people. They erase them. And that is the final move of the Machiavellian.